bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Lorenz, also known as Ricky Verhans, and a great episode for you today. Today we have returning guest, fan favorite, and one of my favorite people to chat with, Dr. Jessica Rose. She's been on this show a few times, and every time I get amazing feedback. I know you guys enjoy our conversations as much as I enjoy having them. And today is another amazing, fun conversation. It does initially get a little dark and depressing, and we do spend some time talking about some current event stuff, but eventually the show gets more casual. It gets a little bit more silly and a little bit more fun. And that's kind of the fun part of doing these long form conversations. You never know where the conversation is going to take you. And this conversation did eventually get a little bit more optimistic and silly and not so serious. And I think we need that. We need to stay aware of what's going on in the world and get all the information, because there's constantly things changing and new information being released and exposed. But we also need to tap out sometimes and just say, I've had enough for today or for a couple days, and just enjoy life, smile, and don't forget to live, laugh, and love. And even though it's hard to be optimistic all the time, don't let all the stuff that's going on in the world drag you down and ruin your mood. And don't stress about the future so much that you stop enjoying the present. I also want to inform you, I am going to be in Florida for a week, about, 7, 8, 9 days, something like that. And I am planning on doing maybe a Patreon podcast while I'm down there. I'm planning on doing a Ricky Rants and Rockfin episode. So I do plan on releasing some content, and I will be back, I think, the last week of November. And I do have some shows scheduled for right after my return. So you will be getting some new shows right after I'm back. But like I said, I will be planning on doing a Patreon podcast and a Ricky Rants and Rockfin while I'm there. I'm bringing my laptop, have a decent little speaker that hooks up to my laptop, and a decent webcam. So hopefully I'll be releasing some content while I'm there. And the beautiful thing about going on little vacations is that it gives you some time to reflect and kind of hit the reset button. So I'm sure I'll have some thoughts I'll want to share with you and some things that I'm pondering on that I'll want to talk about. Also, remember, this is a value for value show. I know 2020, the Union of the Unwanted was really taking off. The Ripple Effect Podcast was really taking off in regards to downloads, and it was just growing at a really awesome rate. And I was hoping by the end of 2021, I'd be doing this full time, which really wouldn't require too much because I don't really have a really expensive lifestyle. So I am optimistic that hopefully in the near future, at the end of 2022 maybe, if donations start increasing and more Patreon supporters, more consistent purchases on my merch store, I can eventually, in the near future, in the next year or two, start doing this full time and really focus all my free time on booking the best guests, finding the most interesting people, and giving you as many shows as possible. So that's kind of the goal, and you guys can help with that goal. This is a value for value show. If you get some value out of these episodes, please attempt to give some value back. Try to give some value back if you can financially. If you can't financially, support the show in other ways by telling people about the show, sharing the show, reviewing the show, thumbs up the show. All that stuff helps. If you can financially support the show, and I know many of you guys have, every once in a while, I'll get a little PayPal donation. I'll get a notification about some merchandise that was purchased, and all that stuff is awesome. But if you're in a good financial spot, try to consistently help the show. Sign up to my Patreon page, or if you're not a fan of Patreon, maybe go on Rockfin and you can tip any show that you enjoy. So if there's a specific episode you really like that you connected with, I know I've been getting a lot of positive feedback about the recent Ian Smith podcast. I know in the past shows I've done with Dr. Jessica Rose, a lot of positive feedback. If you like any specific show, you can tip those shows specifically. And I'll try to find other ways that maybe you can support the show, but there's plenty of ways now with PayPal donations. I have a crypto wallet you can send crypto to. I have a merch store, Patreon, Rockfin. So there's plenty of ways to help the show if you can. And again, I'll mention it one more time, but if you can't, don't feel guilty. Every once in a while, I get listeners telling me, hey, I'm so sorry that I can't donate. I've been a long time listener, but I'm not in a good financial spot, or I'm in between jobs, or I'm worried about losing my job because of the mandates, all that stuff. Don't feel guilty. Hopefully there are people out there who are in good or great financial situations, who enjoy the show on a regular basis, who can support the show. If you can't support the show, don't worry about it. I know you're telling friends about it. I know you're talking about the show. You're sharing links to the show on your social media platforms, and that's more than enough help. The last thing I want is anybody who's stressing about money donating financially, because I don't want to contribute to your stress, and I want to bring happiness and information and thought-provoking conversations, and that's it. So when you can support. Until then, just enjoy the show. Everything I refer to will be in the show description, or you can go to rickyveranis.com or the rippleeffectpodcast.com. We also have a new Telegram group chat if you want to connect with myself and other listeners of the show. That's it. Enjoy the show, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Thanks. I am old.
Am I coming in clearly?
Yep.
Awesome. I went back. I had this microphone a long time ago, and it was like too sensitive. I'm like, I don't know if I want to hear everything too clearly. And then I'm like, I've had it hanging around. I'm like, let me give it a try again and just see how it sounds. So just messing around with the studio a little bit. So we'll see. But I am a little nasally, so that's not the microphone. That's just me, if people are wondering. But
yeah, you sound sinusy. What's going on?
I think well, the cold doesn't exist anymore, so I don't know what it is. So it's obviously COVID. I know it's not COVID because I brought my kids to a wrestling event. They got into pro wrestling during the lockdown because there's nothing else to watch. So we went back and started watching all the stuff that I grew up watching, and like just the
the Undertaker and all that.
Okay, yeah. So they got really into it. So we brought them to their first event a week ago. I think it was a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, and I had to get tested. So because obviously I'm not vaccinated, so we got tested. It was funny because I'm like freaking out a little bit. I'm like, I know this shit doesn't mean anything. So I was a little nervous because I'm like, what? I mean, if I get a neg or a positive result, it just.
Either way, it doesn't mean anything. So yeah, I know exactly how you feel. I have to go through this soon too with, I have to renew my visa, and you're not allowed in any buildings without, they're still, it's your papers or the medical, device going into your skull. So I'm hoping that I can, get what they're calling the rapid antigen test, which is still bullshit. But like they either I've heard two things. I've heard they go in your mouth, or they go like just on the outside of your nose. So yeah, I plan to make a really, really, really dramatic scene when I go in there. Like I'm going to tell them I got a brain bleed the last time, and I'm just going to lie, but I'm just kidding. Anyway, I'm kind of freaked out too. And it's exactly what you just said. It's like the results will be meaningless either way. Like,
I mean, even if I have it, like, what does that mean? Like, I don't care. I remember telling people during the lockdown, I'm like, I don't care if you've been around people who've had it. I don't care. I'm like, if you feel fine, you're fucking fine, and that's kind of the way I look at it. You don't, I've said this on the show before, if you, before 2020, if you went to a doctor and you said that you had something like strep throat, and he's like, well, does it hurt? He's like, no, I don't have any symptoms. He would look at you like you're a lunatic and tell you to leave his office.
Exactly. Like, what happened to people's brains?
So since last we spoke, like, have you obviously your work's been popping up a lot too? Like, I don't know if it was the High Wire or somewhere else. I keep saying like Dr. Jessica Rose, or Dr. Jessica Rose. I'm like, oh crap! Like people are picking up on her great work. So it was cool to see it pop up from time to time, and being referred to on different podcasts. I know. I just had Dr. Lindsay, what's her first name? Dr. Lindsay's actually her last name, but she was on the Union of the Unwanted with Dr. Robert Malone, and she kept saying like, you got to check out openvars.com. So I've been going. Have you seen that website? It kind of just makes it easier to digest.
Yeah, me and Liz, I know the lovely woman who made it, so we talk every day. I actually just got off the. Yeah, we're like friends. We also we check each other's backs with data because like, yeah, hers version of theirs is beautiful and accessible, and like mine is, it's not that, but it's like a lot less sophisticated. So like we're both like doing their stuff and presenting it to people, but it's like, yeah, the way she's doing it is much more reflective of the fact that she's like a developer, at least more so than me. So I am not. I know nothing.
Have you gotten to the point where like, are you sick of talking and analyzing COVID and VARs and all that stuff, or are you?
Yeah.
You are, yeah. Because I'm kind of like the same way. Where like in one hand, like I'd love to talk about other stuff, but it's like the gift that keeps on giving. Like it's never ending. You know what I mean? Like it's just like every day there's something new to talk about. Like this past weekend, the courts froze the mandatory vaccines. There's this article that's going around about the child Pfizer COVID vaccine having slightly different ingredients. Like there was an ingredient in there for that they use for heart attacks or something like that. So there's some correlation, or there's some concern that they're foreseeing the issue that it could be giving the vaccine to kids, and they're trying to cover it up. So like it's just constantly something, and it's like, how do you not talk about it? And and it really is like probably one of the biggest topics and issues and historic events ever, because so I mean you have the world wars, but even in the world wars there's some countries that stayed neutral that weren't really that involved, and that impacted. Like this impacted everybody everywhere so personally that it really is one of the greatest, most important events in world history.
Hands down. Yeah. I referred to it as the biggest shit stain that humans will leave on the historical timeline, like that we like ever in my last podcast. But that thing that you just mentioned about the lactic acidosis thing. So what people might not know is, okay, so there's this thing like that's called a buffer. This isn't beer, by the way. I'm already drunk on wine. This is water. Just to let you guys know, it's my birthday, so I had some wine today. So there's this thing called a buffer, which basically like creates a situation where your pH is neutral, so it's happy. So it's like it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a buffer. So you resuspend things like injectable products in a buffer such that you can, inject it into people. So there's this thing called a buffer called phosphor buffered solution, which PBS, whatever. So this is what Pfizer had been using as a buffer in their product. And they decided to shift it to a combination of something called tris, trimethyl. Anyway, you look it up, tris or trisma, and sucrose. So this trimethyl, wait, I have to look this word up because I don't want to say it wrong. Just a second.
Even if I looked it up, I would say it wrong, for the record.
Whoa. Trimethamine. Wait, that doesn't seem right. Trimethamine. Zwitter ionic. Love that word. Zwitter ionic.
It boggles my, while you're looking it up, I'll just keep talking because I'm good at that. It's one of those things where I'm still stunned by the parents that are basically looking at this approval for children getting the vaccine as a great thing or a success. Or I mean, it boggles my mind because I'm like, if you're looking at risk benefit ratio, I don't even understand how you justify it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, even if the adverse reactions are very little, and there's so many issues with the adverse reactions because, like that Harvard study that said that 1% of adverse reactions are inputted. And I know people personally who had adverse reactions that I know for a fact nothing was inputted. Like, nobody ever reported it. Nobody ever, so it's like, how many of those cases are there? And when we know the numbers are inflated, and yet even using the inflated numbers, the chances of survival are so high that it's like, to me, it boggles my mind that some people are still, and again, I think it's trauma. I think it's the brainwashing worked. I mean, propaganda worked. And like Joseph Goebbels said, you say a lie enough times, it becomes true. They just said it so many times. It was on CNN every day for 24 hours a day for 18 months. It just became true, regardless of all the evidence is telling you otherwise. And I'm really afraid of these parents, and I have like mixed feelings. I'm like, I'm really afraid that these parents that are brainwashed are going to do something they're going to regret. And when you hear stories like, there's that video of that girl Maddie who was a like star athlete and now is in a wheelchair, and she was a part of I think she was a part of the trials. And I think in the research papers it said that like she had a stomach ache, like that was the adverse reaction, and she's in a wheelchair. Her mother said this, like, she's in a wheelchair, and they documented it as the adverse reaction being a stomach ache. Like, so how many more stories are like that out there of just not being reported?
It's really scary. I know. Yeah, I know. You saw Senator Johnson's I guess it was a press, what would you call that? A press conference. Anyway, he had a gathering of people. Maddie and her mom were there, and some other injured people. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. It's incredible.
I've seen parts of it, and as a parent, it's hard for me to watch, to be completely honest with you.
Don't watch it. It's yeah, never mind.
It's that. No, I mean, I think people need to see it because the mainstream media keeps showing you these sad stories of people who died of COVID. And then, I'm sorry, but this is true, 90% of the people that I've seen have died of COVID are morbidly obese. And I'm just like,
that's statistically true too. Of the 335 children, this comes from a guy who works at Johns Hopkins, okay? And Johns Hopkins is not, one of the most benevolent of all institutions, if you ask me, in terms of telling the truth about what's going on, but that's just my opinion. So this guy came out and said, of all of these 335, they couldn't find a single one that died of COVID, and not one. So they died from some pre-existing condition. They were either like really, really deathly ill already, or they had some comorbidity that if they got the flu too, they probably would have died as well. So it's like, wow, talk about like twisting the story. But just to get back to this so I don't forget, so it's called tromethamine. So they switched the buffer and the Pfizer product that they're giving to the kids from PBS to this tris sucrose combination. And tris is the the geeky lab name for this buffer that has as its active ingredient tromethamine, which it's meant to, it can be used as a drug to treat something called lactic acidosis, acid problems in the blood. And I quote from drugs.com, children, this medicine is not for newborns who have any of these problems. High blood carbon dioxide levels, or too much salicylate in the body. So anyway, we don't have to get into that, but that's where that story is coming from. So I've heard a number of people that I trust say, well, you know, the concentration or the dose that they're going to be administered wouldn't really have an effect one way or the other. But it still begs the question, when you change an active ingredient, even if it's a buffer in something like this, and you're talking about putting it into kids, where are the benchtop studies showing that they tried this out and it didn't have any effects one way or the other? It's really odd to me. And another thing people might not know is that they already use that kind of buffer in the Moderna product. So just a couple of things to think about. Yeah, Maddie was in the trial and she has a list of adverse events like longer than my hair. My hair is pretty long, see? And now she's got a feeding tube. She's in a wheelchair. She's in constant pain. They didn't count her in the people who suffered an adverse event. They didn't count her. Her mom has reached out to the FDA and the CDC many, many times, and they're ignoring this mother and her daughter who's been destroyed by these things. There's no doubt. She didn't have anything wrong with her. And within this much time following those two, it's insane what happened to her. And it's like you said, if this is just one person that we know about, think of I just heard us every day you hear something, you're right. It's like the never ending story. I think it was yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine and he was talking to, I don't know, it was a client of his or something. And because it's like the only thing anyone freaking thinks exists now is the COVID or the injections or having all your rights and freedoms taken away from you against your will, or because you are willing, where I live, you know, it came up that this person on their third dose suffered a massive heart attack. And it's just like, oh, I had a heart attack. It's like people are normalizing having a heart attack. That's what I'm hearing. I swear to God. It's like, are you serious? Are you serious? And the other thing that I hear all the time now is like, how myocarditis is mild. You know, if a kid ends up in the hospital with myocarditis, it ain't mild. I'm laughing, but it's because it's so insane what's becoming normal these days. It's like, none of this is normal, people. Do you remember what it was like 3 years ago or 2 years ago? Remember you used to just get in your car and like drive out to a restaurant because you felt like shit and you wanted a drink of wine or beer or a good dish? You know what I mean? You can't do that anymore if you're, you know, certain people. And for the others, I mean, you know, what's next? I don't know. My mind is, yeah, it's boggled. But you're right. Bear's data set is the gift that keeps on giving.
It's just, I want to move on. I mean, I'd love to move on, but it just, I'd love to complain about other stuff. There's other stuff that needs attention too. You know, it's not like the world was perfect before 2020, but it's just one of those things where I can't avoid constantly highlighting the insanity of it all. And I'm glad to see pushback, because in the US there is some pushback, and you're starting to see people that were typically historically democratic or liberals, like unions and stuff like that, and Black athletes, are now looking at this logically, because it's much harder for them to make it political now that we're so far past the election, that now they're looking at it logically. They're like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, there's this, I don't know if you saw the interview with Dr. Sanjay Gupta and Joe Rogan. I think that made an impact, because when a MMA/comedian guy kills a guy who literally his full-time job is analyzing the information, and stumps him over and over again, what does that tell you? I mean, and the idea that somebody like Joe Rogan doesn't know anything about health, like, oh, why would you take advice from Joe? I mean, that, like, your resume saying professional surfer would tell me, because I've been in, exercise and just gyms and sports my whole life, would tell me that a lot about health and nutrition, more than or at least equal as much as seeing a PhD on your resume, because we put into practice things. We actually do things, and we're constantly trying to optimize our bodies, and we're constantly trying to figure out, like, how do we tweak this? How do we do that? Let's read some research. Let's, figure out how I get the most. How do I recover? How do I, what nutrition I need for this, for that. And so historically, you look at, like, gym rats and people who are into sports, like, you think they're dumb and you think they're not intelligent. I just had Ian Smith on my show last night, who was the gym owner of the New Jersey gym that refused to shut down. And we were talking about this, and how important, one, it was for him to stay open for mental health, and two, how just, like, none of it made any sense. And there was literally nothing bad happen because of his his decision to open. Like, there was no deaths, nobody died, it's like there were no masks, no deaths. And it's like, how do you make sense of that unless you realize that, yeah, we're being fucking lied to. So this idea that, like, Joe Rogan, who's done plenty of shows on diet and nutrition and health, doesn't know anything about health is insane. Because you look at most of these doctors who are talking about health, no offense, I'm pretty sure in most athletic things they'd probably suck at. They've been bookworms. I mean, a lot of them have been. I mean, because you get to see things from both perspectives, which is why I find it so fascinating, because you get to see it from the person who's been really deep into the research, but you've also been an athlete, so you can put some of that knowledge into practice and kind of see what makes sense.
I adore Joe Rogan, by the way, first of all. And if I was challenged by something on something by him, I'd be scared too. But let's hope we never disagree. I will be on your show soon, Joe.
Let's get that going. Let's tweet Joe Rogan. Let's get Jessica Rose on the show.
Hey, put me on, and I want to be on an episode with Maynard. Okay. I will die happy after that happens. So if you want to grant me my last dying wish, that's what I want, okay? Maynard will love me. We can talk about anything, wine, music, COVID.
He's a very I loved Tool growing up. They're one of those bands that just broke through doing exactly what you didn't think would break through, just minutes of sounds and quietness and, like, one beat repeating over and over again, or one little sound, and it just put you in a trance. I mean, it's obviously Sober was, like, one of the first songs that I'm like, wow, this is different. This is, and his singing style, how many people copied that afterwards? There's a band called 10 Years that I liked. And for a while, I'm like, why do I like these guys so much? I'm like, oh, because they sound like Tool. And it was just like they had a similar type of style. But it's he's super fascinating. Didn't he had remember Bill Hicks was he had a sample of Bill Hicks in one of the songs. You probably know the song because you're such a fan. Remember?
Every song, yeah. But refresh my memory, because I don't know names.
Well, so Bill Hicks was the comedian who it was before one of the songs on Anima, where he's like, oh, you think drugs haven't done anything good in the world?
Yeah.
That was
and burn them. Like, yeah.
Have you followed, like, what's his stance on all this on Maynard? Because a lot of musicians, I remember that last Rogan podcast. I did remember listening to just about 90% of it, but I can't recall how much they talked about COVID, and if they did, if it reflected his perspective on it.
Well, first of all, I just want to follow through with my thoughts on Joe. That guy does his research. He's kind of astounding to me how much he knows about so many different subject matters. Like, he asks really good questions. I haven't watched all of his podcasts, of course, but like, I think he really does show an incredible amount of ability to really understand things, not just to read a couple of things and ask questions, but he seems to grasp like hard things really well. And Sanjay Gupta, I mean, you know, all he did there was say they lied. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you like say you're not telling the truth here? He didn't take horse medication. He took a prescription from his anyway. So yeah, he was literally just defending the truth. He did nothing else. So I loved watching that. But I don't know. I heard Maynard had a bad time with COVID. I would love to talk to him. I'm serious about this because I hope I don't sound like a total idiot right now, but I heard that he had maybe some issues with like arthritic joints, like maybe he had some kind of problems with that because of the subsequent long COVID. I don't know. That's what I don't know him, and I try not to say things for people that I haven't heard from their mouths. So all I know is I think he did kind of have a bad time with it, but yeah. Anyway,
well, there's a lot of people that are speaking out now. You have Aaron Rodgers, you have Kyrie Irving, you have Eric Clapton. Who knew that Eric Clapton was so punk rock? You know, while all the punk rockers are being a bunch of pussies. It's just like, I'm like, wait, Eric Clapton's the one who's speaking out against this? Like, it boggles my mind. And then Rage Against the Machine and so many of these other artists that, I mean, you realize like they're not against the liberal machine, they're just against the conservative machine. And if you're really against the machine, you realize it's all the same machine, like all together.
Yeah. Yeah, you're all gonna get bulldozed. It doesn't matter from which direction. Yeah, Eric Clapton and Peter McCullough have become good friends. He went to his house for, yeah, and he had a private concert. So it's like, that's so cool. I just love these new friendships that are being made. Yeah, so
awesome. When I had him on, I had so much positive feedback on just how knowledgeable he is. And he literally, you could not debate the guy because he's so pinpointed with his information, and he speaks in such certainty because he knows the information. It just and to go back to the Joe Rogan thing, one thing I really do appreciate about him, because I'll tell you, obviously you know who Del Bigtree is, right? And
yeah.
When Del was on my show at the height of the lockdown, at the very end of the show, I'm like, oh, we need to get you on Rogan, because he's had Dr. Hotez, who's a piece of crap, and some of these other people who just go on there just talking about how great vaccines are without telling the public that he has some incentive in doing that because he has financial interests. And Del Bigtree's like, he's like, fuck Joe Rogan, because I've been trying to get him, or what he said, something like that. He like swore, and he's like, myself and Robert Kennedy Jr. have been trying to get on there. We've had our people talk to him, and he won't have us on. And he said he's a coward or something like that, whatever he said. And I'm just like, damn, man. I'm like, I want to believe, because I've listened to so many of his episodes. And the thing about his show is he's very honest, and people like honesty. And you like to believe that it's not fake honesty, that you're seeing parts of him that are real, and you have a kind of obviously you don't know him personally, but you have a little bit of an understanding of who he is as a person, and you want to believe that he'd be open-minded to all sides of the argument. And it was kind of discouraging when Del said that, because I'm like, to know that Robert Kennedy Jr., who obviously isn't a right-winger, I mean, he's a Kennedy, for God's sakes, he's very famous for his battles with chemical companies, and he understands just how industries, how much influence they have, and how they can hide research and all these other things. He'd be a nice, not conspiratorial type of person to have on, to defend our perspectives or at least the other perspectives. And to hear that he wasn't willing to have him on, I'm like, I wonder if there's more to the story or what's going on. And when the COVID thing started happening, Rogan had, I forget who the doctor or scientist is, or somebody, some expert on, who kind of did some fear mongering. And I'm just like, oh God, I'm like, Rogan he's falling for the trick. And little by little, I would listen to an episode from time to time, and I would hear his opinion slightly change a little bit. And then in the Dr. Sanjay Gupta episode, you basically found out why it changed. And for people who aren't aware, didn't listen to the episode. What's that?
There's nothing like the mother of experience. I mean, that's like incredibly like valuable, if not the only valuable thing to like have the experience yourself, and then to also be empathetic, because maybe you haven't had an experience that someone else has, but they have, so they know more about it than you. So maybe you should like anyway, that changes your mind a lot of the time when you go through something.
Well, for people who are listening who didn't listen to the episode, he was supposed to get the Johnson vaccine, and then they pulled it before he could get it, and then he was going to reschedule. And then during that period, he had, I think, at least one friend during that period, but eventually he had a couple friends who had severe adverse reactions. And one of them was like a jujitsu like black belt who was in excellent shape and had no pre-existing conditions, and he ended up having like a heart attack and like 2 strokes. And it completely, and it completely changed his perspective. And little by little, he started seeing things from the other perspective of like, okay, maybe there are some adverse reactions here. Maybe they are suppressing some information. And knowing Rogan and how much he knows about diet, health, and nutrition, he understands that you can, like, there's natural ways of making your body strong and healthy to eventually, if it gets a threat of a virus that can be dangerous, your body's ready to fight that. And there's no conversations of that. And I started seeing Rogan talk about that on his show, where he's like, why isn't anybody talking about diet and nutrition? Why isn't anybody why are people being suppressed for talking about vitamin D and vitamin C and zinc and all these other things? And why are all these doctors who have just a different opinion, or, for lack of a better term, they're a second opinion, because that was completely acceptable at one time to have a second opinion. Why are those people not able to talk?
Yeah, it's like you have heard nothing about health promotion. They're not even saying like the most like obvious thing of all, like, hey, if you're worried about COVID, how about throwing away your silly little mask and stop smoking? How about that? If you care so much about your lungs, why don't you try that out? It's like, I see, it really like boggles my mind, because every single day where I live, I see people wearing these stupid things on their faces outside, and they'll take it off to have a smoke. And when they're finished smoking, they'll put it back on. And I'm like, no, it can't be. Like, I have like nothing left to give to that kind of, like, I don't even know where, I have no words. That's how I feel.
Hitler would have a word. It would be eugenics. This is like the argument for, so some people are just, oh, your kitty's sleeping.
No, that's how I feel. Just lump on a table.
For people watching, it's a cat, a very comfortable cat. I mean, that's kind of the argument for eugenics. It's like you're trying to like filter out the weak, but it's not even, these are mentally weak people who, and it's not the fault of their own, because I think that we've created a system where it's beneficial to just do what you're told and not ask too many questions and go to college and don't, it's like the Dr. Tom Cowan thing, right? And I think one of the interviews we did prior to Dr. Tom Cowan, when we were talking about how when you go to university, like, these are the books that are the foundation of the way you look at things. And it's like, well, you don't even, it's not even something that's even entertain questioning those books. It's like we don't question anything. It's like we just like these are people who did the research prior to us. These are the theories that we have adopted in as our own, and we just never question those things. And that's kind of, so I think little by little we're conditioned to do that, and there really isn't a whole lot of benefit in going against the grain. Typically there's not a whole lot of benefit in asking a lot of questions. There's a lot of benefit in being a good person, a good civil person who just does what they're told, doesn't ask questions, and lets government do the thinking for them. And that's why I think we, in a way, like the Great Reset, obviously the way they're trying to rebuild the world as we know it is not a good thing, but there are some old, what's that? What's
Sorry.
that? Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I know.
Have you seen that picture of Jacinda as Maleficent?
No,
Okay, you have to duck go that when we're done. Just type in Maleficent and Jacinda. It's really beautiful.
well, the thing is, they're going to use global warming or global climate change now and all these other things to push these agendas, and they're going to convince so many dumb people that it's for moral reasons. It's like, oh, it's for the betterment of society. It's because we're trying to prevent, the whatever they're trying to prevent. It used to be warming. Now I don't know what it is. Climate change. They're worried about it being too cold, too hot. Who knows? But or carbon, the carbon tax and all this stuff, the smart cities. I mean, these are all real discussions that the World Economic Forum and all these very powerful and influential people are talking about and discussing. And they're going to trick the liberal left who truly do care about the environment and truly do care about, and it's weird because the environment's something that we could, the left and the right do kind of have in common a little bit, because you think the right, like in the South, a lot of farmers are conservatives and they love animals, they love Mother Nature. The left, you think the hippies, like big into natural remedies and all that. Like we should be on the same team on a lot of these issues, and yet there's this divide, and it just makes it easier to kind of turn us against one another. But to go back to the because unlike Joe Rogan, I don't ask great questions all the time, and there was something I wanted to kind of get into a little bit that we kind of got off track a little bit, was your perspective on science, or the people who focus just on the science, and then people like yourself who also are a athlete who put some of it into practice. Do you think sometimes there's a lack of understanding of the amazing ability of the human body? Because you see over and over again athletes that are told you'll never be able to walk again, you'll never be, and they do it, and they call it miracles. But it's, to me, it's like, it's not really a miracle. It's your lack of understanding, because you're not an athlete. You never trained. You never, try to optimize your body. Like, I mean, the fact that a guy who's 6 feet tall can dunk the ball, and there's tons of them in the NBA, like, that's not a miracle. That's hard training. That's exercising. That's understanding, how to optimize your body. Like, do you think that there's a separation, there's a lack of understanding of the human body from the scientific world?
Oh man, the disconnect it's insane. And we're not talking about COVID here. So I'll tell you, I'll give you a personal experience story. I would go as far to say there's no connection anymore in like 98% of human beings to themselves and their body. So I hate telling the story, but now I have to. Okay. When I was younger, I lived in Newfoundland, Canada, and it's very cold and wet there. It rains like, I don't know, most days. And it's not just the rain, it's the cold, and it's the kind that gets into your bones and your lungs. And so I developed something that this doctor called cold-induced asthma. So all of a sudden one day I just had this thing, which was an asthma attack, and it was the most frightening thing I ever experienced. And so she said, the diagnosis is, as long as you live here, you're going to have this. And I'm like, seriously? And she's like, yeah. And she, she wasn't necessarily wrong, but listen, I was a teenager then, so I didn't know anything about anything. So anyway, so I moved out of there eventually, and then now I live in, like, you know, the desert kind of climate. So yeah, and of course my health improved as you get older. You kind of get a little bit smarter, you hope, and you learn what your body needs, diet wise, exercise wise, protein wise, because everyone's different, right? You learn these things as you go. So I had an episode maybe 7 years ago. I was surfing one day, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I had, I hate telling this story. I had an asthma attack in the water and I almost drowned. And sorry, I was knocking on wood, Nanny. And so I didn't drown. And I, you know, one of the methods I used to start breathing again in the absence of having a bronchodilator is to relax. That's the only thing you can do. So that comes from here, literally. So I did that. I went through the exercise, and then I knew, okay, shit, I gotta buy one of these little bronchodilator things to have on reserve, because apparently this stupid thing came back. It didn't come back out of nowhere, just so people know. It came back because of a bleach trigger. Bleach, chlorine, these things are terrible triggers for asthma for some people. So, and I was also, it was cold that day. So, but yeah, it popped up because I was living in an apartment that was really moldy. So every time I took a shower, I would throw a bottle of bleach in there. This was before I knew that it was probably a bad idea to be inhaling that much bleach. And so, yeah, that's about the trigger. So I went to a pulmonologist. And because where I live, you can't just go to a general practitioner. You have to go to a general practitioner and then get a referral to a specialist. So I was referred to a pulmonologist, and he actually sat there across from me, and without asking me any questions, without talking to me about anything, he wrote me a prescription for a steroid inhaler. And I looked at him and I was like, you cannot be serious. I'm not going on a steroid inhaler. You've got to be kidding me. And he's like, no, you need to, or, you know, this is something you're going to have for the rest of your life, and you can't do anything about it. So you need to do this. And I'm like, no, I don't. And I said, write me a prescription for the bronchodilator, like I came here to have, you know, as a backup, just in case. And then I will go and I will cure this on my own. And he laughed at me. I think I might have even told you this story before. Anyway, he laughed at me. And I said, you mark my words, buddy. Like, you know, and if I didn't believe it before, I believe it now, because you just incentivized me by mocking me. So I left, and I put myself on a regimen. I'm very responsible when it comes to my body and my health. Who else will be, right? So I started a running regimen, 5 minutes a day. You know, cleaned up my eating a little bit. Just took care of myself, and to get myself past the trigger phase and what had become like mast cell degranulation with, you know, all the stuff going on in my lungs, ready to go. I had to do the exercise where I would like inflate my lungs a little bit more than I did the day before. So it was very long. It was very hard. It took months. But I remember the day, it was like 4 months later, I was running 45 minutes without like any trouble. Solid, like good runs, hills and everything. And I took this deep breath, and I remember it. And I looked up at the sky, and I was like, you know, just grateful, because it was like, this is what I was trying to get back, like just ability to, it was kind of like losing the fear of not being able to breathe. I don't know if anybody knows what I mean, but not being able to breathe, that's probably why everyone's freaked out about COVID. That's the scariest thing I think you can experience as a human being. So I can relate to that fear, by the way, but prevention is what we're talking about. So yeah, it's if people went through what I went through, you take your body into your own hands. Stop listening to these people who are just writing you prescriptions or telling you you need to get injected or this and that. At least get a second opinion if you don't trust yourself. I guess I'm lucky. I trust myself and I know some stuff. So I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, I think, and if people have lost this connection to their own body responsibility, then I don't know what you can do to kind of like make them understand that they are in fact completely responsible for themselves. The government is not the owner of their body, and that's how people are acting. And even if they're not, even if they don't think that, their behavior is manifesting such that their body is becoming their property. If you believe these people who are telling you that, this is back to these COVID injections, that you need to get a booster every 6 months for the rest of your life to protect you from COVID, you really have to do some like backing up and do some reading. Find out what a vaccine is for, find out what a vaccine is, and then find out what a booster is for. And why we use that once maybe in life. What they're doing isn't vaccination, it's something else. It's more, as you know, something more like therapy. And if you're not sick, why do you need therapy? Why do you need, anyway, we can go into the details of that if you want, but yeah, I think to answer your question, the disconnect is a very Grand Canyon-y type gorge. And for most people to jump from one side of the other, it might be impossible at this point. Maybe the younger generation, you know, they can hopefully, you know, have a good influence in their life, maybe an athlete, you know, maybe a musician, maybe a parent who's going to help them to understand like how much power and control you actually have with this thing that you're in. It's like, this is a machine and you got to oil it. So yeah, that's my answer.
No, I always say it's like a car that you can't trade in. Like if you understood that you can't trade in your car, you would put the best fuel in it, you would change the oil, you would make sure everything's lubricated.
Their bodies worse than their cars. Isn't that funny? They do here.
Well, I said this with Ian Smith yesterday, how it drives me nuts when I drive by a fast food place and I see like a AMG Mercedes or a, you know, M3 or something that uses like the best fuels and synthetic oils and all the best stuff goes into that car, which can be traded in, but you're putting the cheapest shit in your body that can't be traded in. And so your body, that car, if the tire gets flat, if the rim gets wobbly, if the steering gets loose, you're stuck with it and you can't trade it. And it's like, people need to look at their bodies that way. But the other thing too is it's really incredible what a human body is capable of. It, you know, when you're exercising and it's getting stronger, it's your body adapting to what the stress that you're putting it through. It's saying like, okay, I need to get stronger because you're making me lift these weights or whatever it may be. I mean, just think about like if you get cut without ever consciously thinking about like, I need to fix this cut. Let me think about it. Like your body's just naturally immediately healing itself. Like it does that with everything. And if your body is strong and healthy and you give it what it needs, it makes the best medicine. I mean, that's why vaccines were initially a huge thing, and because they understood that the best medicine against a virus was the antibodies that you make. It wasn't a foreign substance that you're putting in, it's your actual, yeah. So
Stimulated the immune response. This is the other thing that they're trying to, like, they're rewriting immunology. That's the thing that came to me the other day. It's like, to answer all the questions that people are asking, they're trying to rewrite immunology. They're trying to erase the entire concept of natural immunity. And it's like, if you knew what vaccination was, you would see the obviousness of the fact that that's a secondhand mimicry of what the body does on its own. And it's always less efficient. It's always less broad spectrum because it's targeted. It's always, less lengthily in duration. It's like, how come people don't know that? It seems strange to me. You don't have to know anything about viruses or vaccinology or immunology just to kind of understand that process of vaccinating, introducing, a killed pathogen into your body to stimulate your immune response is like, that's the intentioned way of doing it naturally, because normally you breathe stuff in, or maybe you eat something and you get a pathogen that way, or you get it in your mucous membranes or something. You get introduced to it, and that same thing happens, but in the way that was kind of designed to happen over gazillions of years of evolution and coevolution with viruses and retroviruses. I mean, our genome is 7% retroviruses. I mean, come on, like why are these people being allowed to demonize the immune system itself? It's like they're trying to make every human being not a human anymore, but a patient. And they won't be happy until everyone's a patient. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm seeing now. It's not necessary. It's bogus. Like, I've been saying this the whole time. It's like, this could end tomorrow. It's like, stop with the ridiculous mandates and the laws, and let your kids run wild like we always have, because they're completely fine with this virus. Lucky for us. They're the buffer zone in between, us and the virus. Let it go. You want herd immunity? Let it go. If you keep pushing this shit, you're going to be adding to the evolutionary pressure that induces the mutations. And these RNA viruses, they mutate really fast. And that's all they do. That's their job, So you're pushing them to escape. That's what it's called. They're escape mutants. And one of these days, if we're really keep pushing our luck like this, we're going to get one called a variant of concern. We have this Delta variant that everyone's talking about now, which it's fine. It's highly infectious, which is okay. It's even better when you're talking about, something that isn't virulent, because then everybody gets it and then they get immunity and then it goes away. That's what happens. But if we're, like I said, if we keep pushing our luck, we're going to get something that's going to affect kids, or that's actually going to kill people at a high rate, or, it's like, I don't know when everyone assumed they had a license to screw with nature. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You don't have to be like a granola to believe in the power of the body just to do what it does. I mean, especially not in this context. And I'm not saying that everybody has an easy time with this. I'm saying that you can reduce your chances of having a bad time with it if you go in fighting. And the way to do that is to not be vitamin D suppressed, have zinc, vitamin C. There are ways to fortify and optimize your immune system so that when you get it, because everyone's going to get it, you don't get that sick. If you're high risk, have some ivermectin on hand, have some of the treatments that are really, really showing promise in the context of COVID. It's like I don't know, I think everyone's lost it a little bit. And it's getting harder and harder to think about reeling it back. Do you ever think about that? Because I tried to think about that the other day and I'm like, I don't even know where we would start rebuilding. Do you know what I mean? It's like everyone who's lost their business and their lives or a loved one, or it's like I don't mean to be depressing, but it's like, and I think it's actually a good sign that I'm starting to think about this, because it must mean that I can envision something after this. But it's like, how are we going to get there? I mean, besides just saying, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore on a global scale. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of this started before 2020, and even after COVID's out of the news, it's still going to be going on. And what I mean by that, it's the eugenics, depopulation, control everything globalist type of agendas that are being pushed. And this isn't about the virus. This isn't about, and most people who have been in alternative media community, I mean, when you look at Bill Gates and just, the guy's been a scumbag his whole life. I mean, he get all this credit for Windows, which he just bought and then sold to IBM. He had a horrible reputation in the public eye until eventually he started the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And of course, people in mainstream media will tell you, what does Joe Rogan know about health? And don't listen to him. He's not.
And that creep.
Yeah, that's my point. And Bill Gates, who
doesn't wear a sweater vest, so
yeah, I don't trust anyone who wears a sweater vest. And Bill Gates, I mean, the dude, like you said, he doesn't look like he has ever exercised in his life ever. He goes around just talking about how important it is to vaccinate everybody, but then 2 seconds later, in another conversation, sometimes in the same conversation, he talks about how we have too many people on this planet. And I'm just like, wait, are you guys not connecting these dots here? Like, he wants to vaccinate everybody, and he thinks there's too many people on the planet. So, I mean, I'm not Alex Jones here, but I mean, I have to connect these dots because they're pretty damn close to each other, and it's making a lot of sense. So, I mean, people like him can go around giving misinformation, and then even Fauci, like the fact that Fauci is still interviewed on TV tells you that none of the news stations on TV are about the news. They're just marketers for Pfizer and everybody else. Have you seen that video that's going around that somebody's taken all these little snippets of at the end of news segments when they say, "Oh, today's news is brought to you by Pfizer." Yeah, and it just like,
yeah, it's funny.
It's
well, horrifying. You know what I think? I think maybe this whole thing would have played out differently if Fauci was taller. No, seriously, it's like he's so not threatening. He's this little man. So maybe that's why everyone thinks he's this cute little man, like when you see him stand beside Trump in those old videos, he's like
You're kind of right. That could play a factor. If he was I mean, he does seem like a cute little
know anything,
What's that?
I said, what else would explain it? People's faith in him. He doesn't know anything about immunology. He's never been in a lab. He's hey, did you know that Robert Kennedy's book is coming out? The Fauci book?
Yeah. What is it called? It's called Truth About Fauci. Is it?
Yeah. Something to that effect. I should note offhand. Yeah, that's going to be a good book. I think everyone should read that.
Here it is. I just found it. The real. I'll screenshot so we can show people. It's actually, I don't know how, but it's on Amazon, which is surprising. The real Anthony Fauci. Here we go. Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War, Democracy, and Public Health. Yeah, it's people should definitely support it and go purchase it. And
just read the book. I mean, because it's full of it's a good book. It's full of interesting little tidbits.
Have you read it
already? I might have helped with some proofreading.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you thought about starting a website? Well, I know you have a website, but it's with maybe interviews, all the interviews you do, and just like archive everything?
My I do not consent website is my website. So it does have the list of all the podcasts and interviews I've done, but it's like really lowbrow because it's the website that I brought into existence to show people the illustrations from my R code. So like in order to convert my R code into put it onto, there it is, onto my GitHub and like load it onto this Netlify thing. I mean, it looks okay, but it's not very sophisticated.
Yeah,
but if
it's easy.
down, like just go more down. After this, these are my publications more. So these are it's really not like fancy, but like everything is here. So you can just click on these. These are all my interviews and things, but like, yeah, I wouldn't know how to say, well, I did proofreading for this book here. I did a podcast with Robert Kennedy the other day though, so that'll be up here soon.
Oh, is that out already?
No, it will be soon. He's in Italy now, so it was so charming. I really enjoyed talking to him. I was really nervous up until I got in front of him, and he's a really nice person, and we had like 3 minutes after our quick podcast session, and I learned that he was a falconer. So I wanted to hear about it because this is something I'm really fascinated by. And, I used to bird watch when I was younger with my dad. And so he told me this amazing story about these experiments with ravens and crows that one of his friends had. And here comes the cat. Are you getting jealous again? He's getting jealous. So yeah, it was a really, really lovely 3-minute conversation about crows and ravens at the end. So I was, yeah, it was a really nice, nice conversation. Yes, you're interrupting, and now I lost my thought. Yes.
Yeah, I give him a lot of credit because all the backlash and being labeled a anti-vaxxer and all the stuff, when he's like a very credible person who really was kind of pulled into this whole movement, because
everybody is kind of pulled it, like that's a really good point that you're making right now about this whole thing. Like all these people that are being labeled with these dumbass names like anti-vaxxer, they're all injured from having taken the vaccine or the injections of late. It's like, how does that like compute in your brain? I am fully vaccinated. I'm vaccinated against things you people haven't heard about. I study this. I study pathogenic viruses to make money to eat. It's like there's nobody less anti-vaccine than me or Robert Malone or everybody. It's just crazy. It's like all we're doing is saying what is going on, what we're seeing as specialists, as cardiologists, as virologists, as people who've worked with Pfizer, as people who've worked in biotech. I mean, it's like to call Geert van Bosch, the whole thing is just so insane. I went on a tangent again there, but yeah. The labeling thing really rots me, the whole lexicon that was created to create more division, because people they want the single pill solution, and it's like and they're all detached from each other now anyway because these cell phones, and it's like it's so much easier just to call someone something and then walk away feeling righteous instead of actually talking to them about like how they actually feel. Wouldn't that be more constructive? Yeah.
that is a huge issue where people aren't willing to have discussions with people they disagree with, and it drives me nuts. I'm like, you learn so much from talking to people who you disagree with, who are going to challenge your beliefs or make you rethink what you thought you knew. And it's so beneficial. And to just assume you know everything just doesn't make any sense. One, it's ignorant, and two, like, I don't want to be wrong and be defending some wrong perspective. I want somebody to correct me so I can start, being right on whatever specific topic we're discussing. So I'm not regurgitating something over and over again, and the whole time not knowing I was wrong because I didn't want to hear the other perspective. So it's so important for people to have those discussions. What you're seeing on this topic, and I guess in the political world, it's happened a lot in the past, where people from both sides, they just won't meet in the middle and have the discussion. And not to label people, but it seems like more often than not, people who are on the left are a little bit more emotional and less willing to kind of just like, okay, let's look at it like logically, and let's just look at the information. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? And it's like they so in their hearts want to believe. And this is maybe because maybe another reason why people on the left, myself being a musician, being I grew up, I was always fascinated with art, painting, poetry. I mean, all the artistic things, anything that was art related, I loved. I loved being creative. And so it was always like, okay, I'm more compassionate. And the left seems more compassionate. Like they don't, I always looked at the right as like these capitalistic a-holes who only cared about the bottom line and making money. And that was never an interest of mine. I'm like, I don't care about that. I'm like, I relate more with the left that seem to be artistic and seem to care more about, the bigger questions like philosophy and tapping into your emotions and dealing with trauma and all these things that it's like, so I wonder if because people like myself that are more attracted to the left, because typically maybe we are more emotional, maybe that's what gets in the way of at looking at these topics logically. And then I'm like, well, then what the fuck happened to me? Like, how did I see through it? How did I, who knows? I guess everybody's journey is different. Like maybe it's a artist, maybe it's a documentary, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a friend, a relative, somebody who just plants that seed of expanding your whole worldview, and then that little by little leads to other things. But that's kind of, it seems like that's the case. Like a lot of people that I talk to on the left, they seem to really, like in their hearts of heart, like they truly believe that the things that they're fighting for are for the greater good. Like they're convinced that that's what it is. Like they want people to wear masks because they're just trying to protect people. They want people to get vaccinated because they just want life to go back to normal. And it's hard to get through to somebody who is so emotionally invested on these topics and are true believers, instead of just like, well, look at this, look at that, it's like, it goes right back to just wear a fucking mask, and a little bit, I think it's information overload. Like a lot of these people they're the type of people that if they get too much information, they're like, let me just play it safe and just put on a mask. Let me just play it safe and get the vaccine. Like it's just too much information. And, so I thought you throw your hands up and you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to do what the TV tells me because it's easier than trying to filter and analyze all the information as it comes in.
Yeah, but whatever happened to like baseline common sense? I hear you, and I know I see it, but it's like, it never occurred to me you're right. And maybe there's like a moment in time, eureka moment for everyone. And everyone has that potential. And maybe it's because I work in labs and actually have to use masks in certain circumstances. Like when I open something that says, if you inhale this, your face will fall off. So it's like, maybe it's because I have that prior knowledge, but like when some silly bureaucrat is pumping weird lies onto a yak box about FDA approved products and wearing masks and stuff, it's like, why would I do that? That's my reaction. I'm like, is there a rationale? No. So why would I do it? Because that guy's going to chase you with his gun if you don't. Oh, okay, that's a good reason to learn how to run faster, but I'm still not going to put on your stupid mask. I'm not doing surgery today. I'm not in the lab. I don't need protect PPE. I don't need it. So like, yeah, I don't know. I guess, you know, you can't speak for anyone else either. So it's like, it's so hard to watch, man. It's so hard to watch it for so freaking long. That's the part that's killing me now. It's like 2 freaking years, people. Come on, open your eyes. They said 2 weeks to flatten the curve, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like mandates work. Did you hear this one lately? This New York guy or whatever. I don't know names. I'm terribly sorry, but like, I actually heard this person in some position of power from New York say, mandates work. Okay. Right. Like, that's where we are now, people.
I'd be completely content with like starting multiple countries in the US where it just
I think you're gonna get your wish, buddy.
that's true too. Yeah. Dreams too come true.
There you go. You know, you'll have walls in between the states, and Florida will still be exactly as it was because Florida changed it all apparently. It's so funny.
The scary thing too is like all these athletes, soccer players, and there's like a Atlanta Hawks player that got vaccinated, and now he can't play. He won't clear, I guess whatever type of inspection or whatever they do of his health. He's having some health issues, and he's a big gamer, and on his like stream, his gaming stream, he talked about how they're telling him to shut up and not talk about it, but he basically believes he had an adverse reaction to the vaccine, and now he basically hasn't been the same. And you're starting to see all these soccer players all over the world. I know Sergio Aguero for Barcelona, like he during a game recently just like couldn't breathe and had his hands on his legs. And what's that?
You seen the compilation video that somebody made?
Yeah, I saw.
One after another, the athletes dropping. I mean, I can't get that out of my head. I saw that today, and I'm like, they just shut off. There wasn't even the reaction time to put their hands in front of their face, like for the ones who fell on their face. That's like shut down. It's really bizarre to me. I'm like trying to understand what happened physiologically. Like if their heart stopped, because it seems to me that happened in some cases, like their heart just, so like that would hurt like hell, I imagine. It would feel like, you know, implosion or something. And I guess if your heart's not, yeah, but that wouldn't make you fall over. That would make you like lose, you know, consciousness a little more slowly. That's how I would describe it, but not like collapse, no movement. That's weird. Well, and it's happening in many people that are like, if we're seeing this happen, imagine how many people it's happening to that we're not seeing. Once again, it's like, and how is this possibly something that we're seeing real time and not immediately saying, what's different here? Ah, I know what's different. These products are different. Maybe we should put a halt to this and find out what's going on. It's like, to me, maybe it's because of what I know, but to me, it's like so freaking obvious that these are the cons. I mean, come on. Healthy 15-year-old boys don't get myocarditis that lands them in the hospital more frequently than elder people. Like, what do you think? I don't know. Again, it's so hard to stay like contained when you start talking about this stuff. And to answer your question, man, would I love to talk about something else? Like,
let's talk about something else. So how's the waves been?
We haven't had waves. It's totally depressing. Next.
That was a fun conversation.
We haven't had waves in like 2 freaking months.
I read an article about how Portugal has like I know we talked about this briefly, but there's one specific spot that has like the craziest waves like in the world. Do you know what spot I'm referring to?
Ericeira, I think it's called. Yeah, there's a longboarding spot there. It's so good that when the World Surf League does their tour, they often stop by. So yeah, I actually watched my cat just laid down on my computer. Lemmy, this is a little bit too expensive for you to use as a pillow, remember? Sorry, I'm just now he's lying on my mouse and he's going to send emails to people I don't want to send emails to. Okay. So,
and let's get into also a little bit of so now that it's we can reflect on the Dr. Tom Cowan podcast. What did you think of some of it? First of all,
today actually, and I thought of him for a specific reason. So, you know, the reason I have to talk about COVID again. So like, because of the mRNA tech. Okay, let's talk about mRNA tech, not COVID. So messenger RNA, the way that we understand, you know, the central tenet of genetics or biology is that you have your DNA, you know, it's transcribed into RNA and then it's translated via ribosomes into proteins. So yeah, I remember Tom Cowan said that ribosomes aren't a thing and that the intermediate is water. So, I mean, I find that completely intriguing and like, what? You know, I don't even know what to make of that yet, but I don't dismiss anything either because I've never seen a ribosome. And as he said, somebody's done the studies to look at the crystal structures and he says, those aren't ribosomes, those are something else. They might be like remnants of some other protein. So yeah, unfortunately, I haven't been able to like really deep dive into more of what he's done. But I think about what we talked about, like I said today, I wondered in the face of this, like, and he probably said this, but maybe I just don't remember. I am old after all. Like what would he say? How would he say, do you remember if he answered a question about how these lipid nanoparticle things with the mRNA are like, what's the process there? If it's not being transcribed by ribosomes into proteins, like how is this mRNA manifesting into protein in the host cells? Like, is it the same water? I don't think he answered that question, but that's what I was thinking about today. I'm like, how would he answer that question? Because he said he doesn't think ribosomes exist. And so, yeah, I don't have an answer. I'm just wondering like what he would say about that. Do you have any insight? Like, because you've talked to him more than me.
I feel like I remember us talking about the topic. I just don't know, like you said, I don't know what the answer was. I mean, I find him so fascinating because I think it's so necessary for the world to have people who take things that we've all accepted to be true and say, well, there's some holes in this, or let's question this. And the world needs that. The world, you know, agree with him or not agree with him. You know, I had Alex from Skeptico on my podcast, and he is not a fan of Tom Cowan's. And when he had him on, he actually interviewed him once. I think the interview lasted like, I don't know, like 10 minutes before they both decided that it wasn't going anywhere. And to me, it's also a interesting thing how when I was talking to Alex from Skeptical, how he was a fan of Dr. or not Dr. but Rupert Sheldrake, who's also been on my show, and I believe he's been on Skeptico also. And I'm like, you do realize like the mainstream thinks he's pseudoscience and he goes against the grain. and you believe him. He's a fan of David Icke, who also has said a lot of what the mainstream would say are fringe, non-scientific things. And it's like, so how do you pick and choose which one needs to show this incredible amount of evidence and which explanation you're choosing to accept or believe that it's not a good explanation? Like, to me, it's fascinating. Like, I feel like so many people I've talked to throughout the years, there's topics that you're like, oh yeah, you're all on board and like you're open-minded, and then there's certain topics like they have blinders to, and I'm like, okay, so you're not open-minded to everything, which is so weird to me, because the way I look at anything is the way I look at everything. Like, I literally question everything, my own beliefs, my own, like, there's nothing that I won't entertain. And Alex kind of didn't like that response, and that it's like, well, flat earth, like, well, do you believe the earth? And I'm like, no, but I'll entertain it. Like, who am I? Like, I've never like been so far out in space that I can confirm that the earth is round, so it's like, what's that?
We already talked about this. It's my theory about how, because I'm fascinated by that too. So I think that the flat earthers are tapping into some kind of, I don't know what that would be called, knowledge, insight maybe, into the fact that we're in a simulation. So they're seeing the borders of the playing ground, right? It's just an idea.
Oh, it makes sense.
And it's like, it's so many people, and
but why is flat earth dismissed? But if we talk about simulation theory, people are like, yeah, it could be. And I'm like, wait, I don't get it. Like, simulation theory is acceptable.
My partner thinks I'm full of shit on that too. He's like, we're not living in a simulation. There's no two people who disagree more than me and my partner. It's really funny. Like, seriously, we don't agree on anything.
Anything? Except dating, right? Except who you should be dating.
Yeah, I ask myself that.
I'm having second thoughts about that one too. But it's
agree that we shouldn't be together at all. Yeah. No, but I don't know. I'm completely not unconvinced. Wait, I didn't need two negatives there.
But is it beneficial to be with somebody who will question your beliefs and make you have to defend them?
Yeah, maybe not in the way that he does. But I think it's really important for me personally, because I'm not like one of these people that's super smart. I look up to people who are super smart, and I seek them out because I'm like a sponge for learning. But I do have an ability to learn quickly and to get things that are kind of like, I've been told, if it's hard, then I get to eat quick, and if it's easy, I'm brain dead. So it's like I have an interesting brain, but like it's really important for me because I don't get things quickly. To have somebody like in my life who can challenge me on something that maybe I think I got right, and it's like, do you know what I mean? It's like I'm like you. I question everything all the time. It's like I think that's how you have to get to the end point of knowledge. It's like question, ask, question, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, and then your knowledge ball gets bigger as you go. But if you don't like, if you don't have knowledge, then it must take
knowledge balls. Well, no, just kidding. So
what?
Knowledge balls. It was just a funny. Somebody's really smart. That dude has huge knowledge balls.
My knowledge balls are bigger than yours. Yeah. You can use that. Let's make t-shirts.
It's like all this like very scientific stuff, and then they'll just have knowledge ball shirts and all this silly stuff we talk about on the bottom.
Spherical balls.
But it's funny because I hear people who, and I see it as beneficial too. Like I don't want to be in an echo chamber of people who just agree with me. But I'm also very similar to you, where like if something's really obvious, sometimes I miss it because I'm over analyzing it. And there's times where like, I'm just like, how the fuck did I miss that? That was so obvious. And because I'm like looking beyond and past that to something else. Not to give I'm not trying to give myself credit, because sometimes I do miss just stupid things that I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, how did I miss that? It's almost like maybe it's not like this, but it's like that saying where like the guy who lost his keys, he's under the light, and they're like, oh, you lost your keys? He's like, yeah, but there in that spot, he's like, no, but this is just where the light is. And it's just like, sometimes things are, yeah. So it's like, to me, it's like, I'm like, well, fuck the light, I'm gonna go look everywhere else. And then it's like, wait, it actually is under the light if I just was willing to go look over there. It's just so yeah, sometimes I feel like and I'm also similar in regards to like, it takes me a long time to decide my stance on something. Like so in very similar type of thinking as you, I don't make decisions, or I feel like it takes me a long time to make a decision or consume all the information. So my stance on something, it's like, okay, let me take a little bit of this, analyze this for a little bit.
That's the thing. It's like it's one of the most frustrating things about being in this brain thing that we have, like, or having this brain thing, because it's limited. It's like we cannot know everything, not even everything about one thing. I find it very frustrating, which is why, I really would like to sign up one day to become a cyborg, but, because I find it fascinating that I could download information and like, no, stop. I'm not going to do that though. They ruined it for me with all this trying to control everyone's bodies stuff. But yeah, we can't know, like that's why I think it's like, and I think it's arrogant to think that you do know something in a lot of ways. Anything. I mean, to even say that, okay, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Maybe that's true. Maybe because I'm able to ask if I'm here, it means that I'm here. Maybe, I don't know. But like, am I here? What is here? What does that mean even? What's here? Am I actually this physical thing, or is this a manifestation of my, whatever, to make it easier for me to use these senses that I have? And anyway, yeah, it's yeah, can we know anything? So how is it that there are people walking around like saying that's wrong? Because you can't say that about anything, really. You can't. I mean, we have to have boundaries, of course, otherwise we can't function, in this reality. But like, it's one thing to like kind of accept something and use it as a way to move through this reality, but it's another thing to like make it kind of ego-y and emotional and say you're wrong and like I don't know. I think that they're different things, and disagreement should be like the mediator of more knowledge gain. Like, it's really important. We should have a podcast called The Disagreement Corner.
And just gather people with the biggest knowledge balls that disagree.
Exactly.
It's funny because when I go out with my buddies, like somebody will say something that's funny like that, right? And then that'll be the joke of the day. Like all night, we'll refer to it over and over again and find 100 different ways to refer to it.
Knowledge balls is just going to be like the thing that we do now in every single podcast.
And then the funny part is that like when you refer to it later and people don't know the origin of it, they're so lost. Like, what the fuck? Why are they saying knowledge ball? Like they have no idea what we're talking about. And we'll just talk about like we know we like knowledge balls. Everybody knows knowledge balls.
And some guy who's really old one day will say, I saw the original episode. I know where knowledge balls comes from.
Now it's trending on Twitter, knowledge balls, hashtag knowledge balls. That's the other thing too, right? Like how important do you, because similar to myself, like you're deep into a lot of this research and stuff. Do you find yourself like, I've said this a lot recently because I think it's a very important point. We spend so much time trying to expose the worst things in the world, where that, and for the benefit, like we do it because we hope it benefits us. Like the result will be that we'll be able to finally enjoy life without all these stresses or these restrictions, and then we almost stop enjoying life. Like we're trying to fight for the right to not to party but to enjoy life, but to party, right, too, also. And yet, like, while we're fighting, we're forgetting, like, we're here for a limited time. Like, stop, like, you can't stop smiling and enjoying life and only fight, because then they win.
It's so like, exactly. Not to be depressing again, but no, this is a good thing to talk about. There's this new multi-movie series called COVID Land. I can't remember the name of the guy who made it. Oh crap.
Oh, cool. Is that the one that Alex Jones premiered?
Yeah, well, he's the orator, and he's not very Alex Jonesy as an orator. He's quite good. He's not as
Lockdown part one, right? Is there more out? Because I've seen the part one lockdown.
Next one is the mask stuff. So the first one is lockdown. So yeah. So did you see this?
I saw the first one because the nice thing about doing a podcast is people send you things all day, every day. So somebody sent me, they're like, hey, it's premiering tonight or something like that. So then I watched like 99% of the first episode, which was the lockdown, but I could tell, like, oh, it's called the lockdown. So
99%. I swear to God, I didn't watch the last 1%.
Are you messing with me?
I stopped it short right before it finished. I don't know why. So it's really weird that you said that. But anyway, I was going to say the part of the interviews when they were speaking to the hospice worker, where she was describing what I know is true and what makes me the maddest about our elderly mothers, fathers, grandmothers, fathers being abandoned and not having a last hug and not having, anyway, I don't want to talk about it because I'll cry, but that's exactly it. Like, we're not here for a long time, man. It could be your last day today. You should live like that every single freaking day. Nobody does. It's like anything can happen. You're probably not going to die from COVID. You might get hit by a car. You might, something might happen. So it's like, why are you wasting your time? Like, even if COVID was deadly, like, why not just walk through life with intelligence and confidence and maintenance of body structure and the best ways that you can? And yeah, it's like all of a sudden life has become fear of death. It's inexplicable to me. And it's also like everyone's so detached from the reality, the simple reality that we're all gonna die. It's just a part of life. Okay, so it's sad for the people who get left behind, but like, it's life and death. It's yin and yang. It's two things. And luckily, we don't know what happens when we go to the next one. I think we just transition into another form of energy, or maybe the same one in some, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? But it's like that's the other thing I can't get over. And when I actually have asked people this, I'm like, what are you afraid of? Dying. And you're afraid of dying? Okay, I guess that's rational. But it's like, I don't think most people follow that thought through. I just think it's bad to live in the fear of anything. And if you live with the fear of dying, then I don't know, that doesn't seem like a good way to live to me.
Maybe there's a healthy middle ground, right? Because I think if you're so afraid of dying, then maybe you won't live life to its fullest. But I guess the other extreme could also result in the same issue, because if you're not afraid of dying at all, which means like you probably are taking each day for granted because you're not even thinking about that this journey might end, you might sleep in and not, you know, do things and enjoy life. So maybe finding some middle ground where it's like, okay, I understand this journey will end, and knowing that it's going to end, and wanting to live life to its fullest before the end, let me make sure I don't take any day for granted, you know. So it's yeah, it's weird because you know, either extreme could be bad, you know, and you don't know. And that's why 2020 was so frustrating, when people were like, oh, just stay home for 2 weeks, just stay home for 2 months, stay home for 2 years. It's like it got to a point where you know, I kept telling people, I'm like, listen, there's seniors that never got the, you know, their graduation. There's seniors who played sports who will never get that year again to play, you know, whatever sport they love as a senior in high school or in college or whatever it may be. Like, all these things happen, like, and we just kept saying, well, there's next year, well, there's next year. It's like, well, it's for some people there isn't next year.
There isn't. That's exactly what I'm saying. Oh, maybe there's not. It's like maybe there isn't. It's yeah. I think you're right about taking things for granted. I think that's what people are doing. Not a lot of thought for people who don't have homes during this, you know, lockdown thing, or the people who live in tiny little apartments. It's like not that easy to stay locked inside when you're like, you know, in a, you know, 10 square meter apartment with many other people. Yeah, it's, I don't know. It's funny that, you know, the people who make the rules, they just don't apply to them. So I keep going on tangents, but yeah, lockdowns are so dumb. I don't even know how that happened. Like, they're gonna do it again for the climate or something coming up soon, I'm sure. They're gonna try doing it again.
I definitely think that's going to be the next goal, is to get everybody paranoid about climate, to give up some freedoms or give them a portion of our hard-earned money or whatever for the greater good. It's all about like this idea of us all coming together for the greater good. And the truth is, like, I'm all for that if the people doing it weren't corrupt a-holes who are going to take advantage of all of us. If I truly believed, or if I truly knew that like universal basic income, we could all contribute, nobody would be starving, everybody would have enough money for the necessities. If I knew that that money would be used wisely and correctly, I'd be all for it. But the truth is, like, what's that?
Yeah. Everyone would, I think. Well, except for the billionaires.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, like, both philosophies have flaws. I mean, universal basic income or any of the socialistic type of philosophies, people will take advantage of that, and people will take advantage of you know, of a free market. I mean, there's free markets aren't moral. I mean, they will do bad things, like dispose of chemicals incorrectly or put a cheap ingredient in their food that could harm people but they do it anyways because it's cheap, you know. So there is no, you know, no ism that will fix all the problems, and that's why I don't plant my flag anywhere. And I don't even like the word, you know, you were saying like, what is truth? A lot of people in the alternative media community, like, we get called truthers or truth seekers, and I don't have any problem with these terms, but sometimes I like to like correct people. I'm like, well, I don't have the truth. I feel arrogant by saying like, yeah, I come listen to my show because I have the truth. It's like, I don't know what the fuck the truth is. I'm on a journey of seeking it and looking for it. But I wouldn't say that like, oh, if you want to hear real news or the truth, don't listen to mainstream media, listen to my podcast. Because it's like, well, I could be wrong about shit too. And, you know, if you want to go on this journey with me, then what's that?
The fact that you say you can be wrong is truth.
Oh, good point.
Sorry. It's the daily girl in me. I'm like, I try and like equate, like, absolutely, I agree with you completely. But like, when I kind of like defend data as being like something like numbers don't lie, people lie type attitude. It's like those numbers are people. It's like that VAERS entry, for example, is somebody who suffered an adverse event for reals in temporal proximity to getting injected with something. And like, so to me, that's kind of like a true thing. Like that happened. I don't know, but you're right. Well, it depends how you look at it, because some people think that they're like, Russian bots adding all the VAERS entries, and that nobody actually exists, and nobody's, yeah. I have one thing to say to that. I have death certificate data that I matched up to these. So not all of them, of course.
Wow. Yeah. Well, the thing is, numbers don't lie, but they can definitely be incorrectly analyzed, right? I mean, or you can manipulate them by maybe using numbers that will help get the result you want, and maybe ignoring other numbers that
anybody who does that with 3-letter or initials in their name. Yeah, just thinking of recent what do we call them, the verb pack meeting that I gave testimony to, the FDA hearing.
yeah.
Wait,
was that, so that was you, Dr. Rose, that was on?
I did it twice.
Oh, you know what's funny? I saw that. I'm like, wait, is that Jessica? I'm like, well, she's the only Dr. Rose that I know that knows this much. And but yeah, it's I'm gonna have to re-listen to that, because I was actually I'm glad you brought it up, because I think somebody sent me a clip from that, and
All that water.
I was curious if it was you or not. So that answers that question. That's awesome.
Having a lot of people, is this soda? I'm having a lot of people like say that to me. They're like, is that Argis? And I'm like, yeah, it's me. It's a little bit more serious because, you're talking about injecting 5-year-olds with experimental shit. I mean, how can you not be angry about that?
Well, what you need to do to make it easier to find all your work is buy the URL, like jessicarose.com or drjessicarose.com or whatever URL you like, or Jess Rose or knowledgeballs.com, whatever one you would prefer.
Knowledgeball.com. Oh my God. Can I have it?
You can, the balls, yes, you can have the knowledge balls. Can I have the balls? Are you talking about the URL? I'm just clarifying. She's talking about the URL, but some girls are attracted to knowledge balls, though. I'm sure that's a thing. I've read it on some Tinder accounts, but it's yeah. Like if you buy it, you can redirect your website to that URL. So you could, like Matt from Content Safe, like I already had the URL rickyvranis.com, ricardovranis.com, and rippleeffectpodcast.com, mostly because URLs are so damn cheap. I'm like, why not buy them all? And then I just had them all. Once he created my website, which is fairly new, it's only a couple months old, we redirected every time all those URLs to the website. So your URL of your website doesn't only have to be that. You can keep it as that. But if you bought another URL, maybe something that is easier to remember, easier to type. Like I always think like, okay,
if it's not taken, that's mine.
Yeah. And then you can just literally have it redirected. You even like, I think one of my URLs was through Google. Well, you know what it was? It was my merch store. So my merchandise store is the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. But the company that I use to create the store and sell the products and make the products, they gave me a different URL. So I bought Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com and then redirected that URL to my store. So it just made life a little easier that way. So it's yeah, you can do that, which, that way, if you could still keep your current URL, but also have maybe something that's easier. What's that?
How much does that cost?
URLs are so cheap. They're like $10 for like 100 years. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they're like really cheap. Like you can go on like any domain name, I think Google or whatever, website, GoDaddy, whatever, and you type in which URL you're looking for, and then they'll tell you if it's available, and then you could just buy it. And it's like super inexpensive. It's like I don't know, like $5-10 for a year, and they'll have sales where it's like $20 for like 5 years or something like that. So
Knowledgeballs.com doesn't exist.
and if it did, I tell you, don't click on it. Might not be what you're looking for.
Good point. I'm gonna lose so much of an audience. Something else. Oh Jesus.
Yeah, now when they try to discredit you, they'll be like, "Isn't that the girl who also has knowledgeballs.com? You can't trust her. She cannot be trusted."
Maybe I should rethink this. I'm gonna do that. I didn't realize. See, this is that part where it's like, yes, she has an applied math degree with an expertise in virology, but she doesn't know what a URL is.
I mean, this was a learning process for me too, because when I started my podcast, there's a lot of stuff that I just had to kind of figure out that I wasn't aware of. So it's yeah, but it can be useful, because a lot of times if you have a website like yours that has your already established URL, people assume like I'm stuck with that. And it's like, no, you can redirect any URL that's available. You buy it, and then usually on the website that you buy it, they'll show you how to put in which website you want that URL to go to. So it makes it fairly easy. So that's something, yeah. I mean, I always put your website in the show description, so it makes it easy. People can just click on it or copy and paste it. But if for future references, if you're doing interviews and you end up purchasing easier URL to remember, you could be like, hey, this is my, just go to jessicarose.com or whatever, whatever you like. So yeah, that's we should do that. Knowledgeballs.com. Yeah.
I don't know how I'm gonna escape doing that for real. Maybe I'll just have knowledgeballs.com and jessicarose.com.
Yeah. And I want to copy you, so I'm gonna get like InfoSac or something like that.
Yeah, this is gonna go on for a long time.
It's like I tell my friends, I'm like, the cool thing about my podcast is if I say something stupid, it's only online forever.
Yeah, exactly. No, everyone needs to know about knowledgeballs.com.
So I know it's your birthday, and you probably have some more wine you want to drink. So I don't want to hold you up too long. Let people know your current URL, not the future ones you're going to eventually purchase, and then also any upcoming events or anything that you're going to be doing that you might want to tell people about. Oh, and you're on Float, right? Let people know which social media.
Right, I forgot that. Yeah, I am. But I don't know how to help people find me there. I started a whole bunch of stuff, but I left them hanging because I've been having this whirlwind of speaking opportunities thing. I haven't even been analyzing data lately.
Well, you know what we could do? So to save you the trouble, like just send me links to any of the accounts that I can find your Float account, because I think we're friends on Float, or we follow each other. I'll put that in the show description. I'll put knowledgeballs.com, wherever that takes people, in the show description. And we'll yeah, I'll put whatever accounts you want in the show description. I'll put there.
Okay. I'm also on academia.edu, but you won't find anything there that you won't find on my I do not consent website. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to share. I just did a podcast with Gal Shalev, which was pretty good. People can listen to me talk about more sciencey stuff and VAR stuff on that.
And all the stuff will eventually be on your website too, right? So people can constantly keep checking the website.
Awesome. Yeah, it's all there in that long list of links. So yeah, my Robert F. Kennedy podcast will be up soon, I hope, whenever it's ready.
Great. Yeah. I'll keep a lookout for that, because I subscribe to his RSS feed on Podcast Addict. It's the app I use for podcasts, and so I'll definitely look out for that. We'll definitely have to get together again in the near future, and maybe we'll attempt to do a show without bringing up COVID. We can talk about knowledge balls, but no COVID.
So by then I'll have knowledgeballs.com, like knowledgeballs.sac.
No, I didn't want to copy you, like be obvious that I'm copying. I went with InfoSac. Okay.
Oh my God, it's so good. Okay, you got that one. I got this one.
Yes. We we'll make sure. We're gonna start a LLC or something, or we'll talk more off air. How far we're taking this?
Oh, this is such a good laugh on my birthday. It's what I needed.
Yeah, so we'll attempt to do a whole show without talking about. We'll pretend like coronavirus and COVID doesn't exist on the
All
next.
right.
We'll be like,
All right.
what are you talking about? I don't even know what. I've never even heard of such a thing.
So we'll put ourselves in the mindset of 2 years ago, so we actually won't know anything about this stuff. I can do that. Can you do that? Let's go back in time mentally.
We can do that. Yeah, it'll be a fun exercise. Can we avoid bringing it up? You know what's gonna happen? Like
Later.
the first 2 seconds, we're like, fuck, we're gonna have to talk about it, aren't we? Like some big news is gonna like break that day, and we're gonna be like, oh, don't do it, don't talk about it.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have an update on Newsom by then.
Yeah. It's I hope things are trending in the right direction. You can only suppress truth for so long before those knowledge balls are out of the sack, I think.
Those knowledge balls roll down that hill.
Somebody should hashtag knowledge balls when sharing this podcast, I'm sure.
I almost said it. Okay,
we have to cut here. Imagine this is like if I was still on YouTube, this would get me kicked off YouTube, not all the other medical misinformation. It was a knowledge ball. Imagine a YouTube representative be like, no, we're fine with all your anti-vax talk. It was the knowledge balls where we drew the line. You went too far with the knowledge balls. We don't want any of that content on our platform.
it's so innocent though, like it actually is. Whew. I'll tell you what I was gonna say off screen.
Well, we'll set something. I know the next like couple weeks, actually, once December comes here, I'm like work slows down a lot, so I'll be much more free to do earlier shows and have much more time. So I'll send you an email, and we'll maybe reconnect in December and talk music, philosophy, art, whatever we want.
Talk about Jesus.
Talk about Jesus.
Talk about Jesus.
Yeah, and yeah, we could talk about Jesus. I'm like, where do I go with that?
Yeah, we can talk about Jesus.
Yeah. As the 2 not so religious people talking about Jesus, that'd be offending somebody, I'm sure.
Jesus was the person I wanted to go back in history and meet, and probably still is. I think there was somebody else I wanted to talk to, just for like 5 minutes to find out who he really was. Or if he I'm sure he existed. He was
save this. I feel like this
ruined.
Good.
Okay.
This could be good. This could lead to some other really ridiculous URLs.
Okay, but next time it's gonna be about Jesus. Okay.
Yes, it's about Jesus. We'll both be wearing giant crosses, and maybe I'll even dress up as a nun or something silly.
Under my tree, I'll put it behind me, and I'll set up a little manger scene, and my cat can sit on it, and I'll have frankincense and myrrh burning, and a big cross. Yeah.
Well, enjoy your Jesus juice, also known as wine, and I'm glad that you're having a great birthday, and we'll keep in touch. I'll email you, and we'll reconnect soon, and say some more ridiculous things. People really seem to enjoy these conversations, so we have to have more of them.
If they really like us, they're really gonna like this one, because this seems to be the best of us.
I'm gonna have to tell people in the beginning of this intro. I'm like, I know it's just like depressing for like an hour, but just hold on. The ending is worth it.
This is not a gimmick. It gets really ridiculous at the end if you have a bad sense of humor. Yeah.
filtering out the sensitive people. We're filtering them out. So it works out just being silly.
Just like put Christmas balls up hanging.
I'll just have two earrings, two giant like ornaments from a Christmas tree just hanging.
Balls.
But yeah, enjoy the rest of your night, and I'll definitely email you. And like I said, in December, I'm much more free because you're always such a trooper in regards to being up late. But we'll reconnect soon, and we'll chat and hopefully laugh some more.
Yeah, we will.
Thanks, Jessica. Have a great night. Take care. Thanks again.
Okay.